valley here held about 1,300 people. Biggest year they had here, they produced or they extracted about 36,000 tonne of shale, and that we've worked out that would have produced about 10 million litres of kerosene in 1 year. Australian Kerosene Oil and Mineral Company took possession of the site, and they started to establish a private town here and a mining operation from 1878 right through to 1911 when they sold the property. And so the story begins with the Scots who came out here. They were brought out because they were at the forefront of this shale mining and processing, and so they had an agent in Glasgow recruiting these Scots with their skills to come and help exploit the valley. This is where it gets interesting. The company insisted the men come out with their women and children. They didn't want a typical mining town with a lot of young men and all the problems associated with that. But in 1905, 6 years before they sold the property, a huge bushfire swept through the valley here, destroying everything. The company abandoned the mines and the processing here. The only thing that survived was the orchard and the orchard manager's house. The house behind me here is the was the orchard manager's house, again built in 1882. It's the only house that survived here. It's allegedly haunted by a couple of ghosts. Different stories about what transpired here. There was a miner who had broken his leg. He wasn't able to work, and so his daughter would find work here, helping out with duties here. The orchard manager here wasn't as generous as he might otherwise have been to this young lady. Once the miner recovered from his injury, there was allegedly a fight at the back of the house here where the miner was allegedly killed. And so there are stories of what appears to be the face of a man coming through the plaster work at the rear of the house. And no matter if you paint it, you still get this face sort of appearing through the paint. We know the cemetery here has 140 souls resting there. We know exactly 100 of them were children under 18. We know a little girl, about 17-month-old, drowned here. Unfortunately, her mother was so distraught. We know that about 14 years later, 1898, after her husband died of kidney failure, she succumbed to the stresses of life and decided to take her own life. In those days, it was against the law or against their religion to commit suicide. She wasn't allowed to be buried in consecrated ground, but they came to a compromise. They laid her body to rest in such a position that her body was within the boundary of the cemetery, but her head was outside the boundary of the cemetery. And of course, there are now accounts of people witnessing the ghost of a headless woman wandering around these parts. I have to say I have never seen any ghosts myself, but I can tell you that I've heard lots of very interesting things that I could not explain. We're approaching now the first site, which is what we call the Incline. And the Incline is a narrow gauge line, but it's got a 28-degree incline going to the top of the hill. It's about 300 metres long, and at the top of the incline they had a 40 horsepower steam engine with winding gear and cables pulling the trolleys from the bottom of the valley here to the top of the escarpment. From there they would then connect to the locomotives and go off to Mittagong with their products and people and so forth. Retorts are the ovens they use to heat the shale to extract the oil. So these are the only retorts of this type left anywhere else in the world. These are horizontal D-shaped retorts.